thought, I don't really want to be like waiting for anybody to tell me what to do or tell me like how to live this uncharted territory. So I was like, let's start a podcast. I was house hacking and I had one rental property at the time. So my partner, Ryan, just had his primary residence. I said, let's talk about real estate, personal finance, entrepreneurship. And he's like, dude, we're barely real estate investors. What do you mean? I'm like, that is true, but I do think that people will latch onto our story from an authenticity standpoint and rather follow along the journey as opposed to having somebody who talks quote unquote down to people who have 100 units already. The podcast was really just the beginning of telling Ryan and I, okay, you can go out this journey alone. You can buy real estate. You can try to buy a duplex here and a triplex here. But if you attach yourselves to people who are getting better rooms and bigger rooms and organically network, those people are going to naturally pull you up to their level. And that's exactly what happened.
Welcome to the Hybrid Real Estate Professional Podcast, where we dive deep into the intersection of career, family, and finances. Learn the mindsets, tips, and strategies to help you on your personal journey to build a life of abundance and purpose for you and your family. Now here's your host, Aaron Amin.
Back to another episode of the Hybrid Real Estate Professional Podcast. Today, I'm joined by my friend and a man of many talents, Cory Jacobson. Cory is the host of the Wealth Juice podcast, which has become one of the top 1% of all business and investing podcasts worldwide. He and his business partner, Ryan, have interviewed some of the biggest names in real estate, bringing incredible insights to their audience every week for the last several years. Cory also recently left his W-2 job and has built a portfolio of 70 plus units across multiple markets, ranging from long and short-term rentals to multifamily apartments. He and Ryan also co-own a short-term rental property management and hospitality company with 100 plus units under management. Beneath the headlines, Cory is also one of the most humble people I've ever met. His endless curiosity, steadfast commitment to helping provide value to others, and championship mindset have inspired me in so many ways along my own journey. This was a wide-ranging conversation with tons of value for investors at any level. Hope you enjoy. All right, welcome back to the Hybrid Real Estate Professional Podcast. Today, I'm joined by my friend and man of many talents, Mr. Cory Jacobson. Cory and I had the pleasure of getting to know each other through a mastermind we were a part of. We were in a small group together, so we spent quite a bit of time together. His story is very wide-ranging, but he's somebody who I drew a lot of inspiration from when I started this podcast. And without butchering your intro, I'll let you introduce yourself to my audience in your own words.
Appreciate it, Aaron. Thanks for having me on. I don't know about a man of many talents, but I appreciate the nice intro. Yeah, my name's Cory Jacobson. I'm from the Philadelphia area. I think Aaron and I couldn't be further apart in terms of geographically on the United States. But we met and we had a connection. So I'm happy to be on the show. And I am a real estate investor. I'm a coach. I coach not only teaching people how to buy their first rental property, but also I coach basketball as well. So it's a passion of mine. And my partner Ryan and I have grew our portfolio to about 70 units, some fully owned, some partially owned over the last 5 years. And it's been a fun ride, along with starting a podcast in the last 4 years. And it's been great.
Cory's one of the most humble people I've ever met. The podcast that they started has become incredibly popular within the business and real estate space. They've had some really prominent and insightful guests on. And that has really provided kind of the fuel for a lot of the fire behind your portfolio growth. And so let's start with the podcast and then how you and Ryan built your partnership to begin with. If you can just shed a little light on how that came to be.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks again. It really just hyped me up here. I appreciate that. So the podcast started in literally April 2020 when the world was in flux. It shut down. And I thought, I don't really want to be like waiting for anybody to tell me what to do or tell me like how to live this uncharted territory. So I was like, let's start a podcast. I was house hacking and I had one rental property at the time. So my partner, Ryan, just had his primary residence. I said, let's talk about real estate, personal finance, entrepreneurship. And he's like, dude, we're barely real estate investors. What do you mean? I'm like, that is true, but I do think that people will latch onto our story from an authenticity standpoint and rather follow along the journey as opposed to having somebody who talks quote unquote down to people who have 100 units already. So it proved that the concept was legitimate. And I remember Coach Carson, took the first chance on us on episode 10 and he came on our podcast. And then from there, we built a virtual resume and people start to say, oh, if Chad will come on the show, I'll come on the show. And I think the best thing about podcasting is that it's a win for both parties. So everyone's trying to maybe push their product or tell their story. And so people started to latch on and we got better and better at it. And the podcast was really just the beginning of telling Ryan and I, okay, you can go out this journey alone. You can buy real estate. You can try to buy a duplex here and a triplex here. But if you attach yourselves to people who are get in better rooms and bigger rooms and organically network, those people are going to naturally pull you up to their level. And that's exactly what happened. We wouldn't have been anywhere near where we are today without meeting somebody like our partner, Sean Winslow in New Hampshire, who we partnered on an 18 unit with. And we brought a skill set and he brought a skill set. And that's how we were able to make this happen. And a ground up development project in Arizona. Like the world is so flat with podcasting and just being in the 21st century. That's really the start. Our podcast is called the Wealth Juice Podcast. And we release episodes every Wednesday. It's fun for me though. That's the thing that I want to lean into the most, is that I truly enjoy it, and making money and doing all that stuff is great. But if you don't enjoy what you do every day, like to me, there's truly no point.
I love it. And yeah, I've listened to many, if not most of your podcast episodes. And I think one of my favorite things is, first of all, you guys have great chemistry as partners. But there's a curiosity embedded in every episode, right? You're always asking the right questions in my mind and probing, but you're never, like you said, you're never talking down or trying to pretend like your audience is at a different level than you are. You're sharing and pulling information and insights out of your guests. And the guests that come on too, I think they settle into that dynamic as well. So it's very conversational, very informative, very insightful. And I just, that endless curiosity and that feeling is something that, again, I draw inspiration from when I'm doing my own podcast. And funny side note about Chad Carson, I know you were texting me about that, hey, Chad was the one who gave the first shot as a more prominent guest. And that gave me the courage to reach out and build my own relationship with him. And I was surprised, but very honored that he was willing to give me a shot too. And you're right, it does start to build a virtual resume. And from there, I was able to get a couple other guests who, I think, once people see that certain guests are willing to come on your show, then it makes it a little more likely that you can book other guests of that caliber.
Absolutely. I think the point of the whole thing is that you have to lean in and know that you're going to suck at the beginning. I think if I go back and I listen to our first podcast episodes, I truly cringe at like listening to us talk. But I think I give us credit for pushing through the fear of like being judged and having people say, "Oh, you still running that podcast?" Yeah, this has helped our lives improve significantly. Like it's I do it full time now. So not just the podcasting, other things, but it really did change the game for us. And I think anything that you do, anything that you start, you have to be willing to not be good in the beginning. And then you learn along the way. And 4.5 years later, we've gotten to a point where we have so far to go, but I feel very confident and I can interview anybody. And most importantly, I have a good time.
Yeah, having fun and enjoying it, obviously, because up until very recently, you were working full time and you were building your real estate portfolio and you were bringing these prominent guests on and having really in-depth conversations and releasing episodes every Wednesday. As a podcast host, I know it's not just that 1 hour you're on the air. That's the work, right? You have to also prepare and come in with a bit of a game plan on what you're going to discuss. So I just hit 1 year on this podcast last week of doing weekly episodes too.
Congratulations.
And I know how much work goes into it. And I have some people ask me like, why do you do it? Is there some sort of direct throughput to making money back? And I do it for the same reason you just said. I have fun with it. I'm connecting with people. I'm getting to have amazing conversations. In some instances, I'm almost getting live coached like on the episode. And usually I take away a lot that I didn't perhaps know before. And then I get to share that forward with whoever happens to be listening to the shows. And I take immense pride in that because this is not a one-time occurrence. This is now a part of a library of content that can be accessed by anyone that wants to hear it.
Yeah, for people listening that are trying to either get into the space or any space, I think the thing that surprised me most were how kind and willing people ahead of me, quote unquote, ahead of me in my journey, were to try to help and bring people up to their level. And I think it's because individuals get to a certain point with money where it just becomes, it's a tool and it's fun and you need it for security and it helps build your life. But really the community and the giving back and the watching somebody else who was in your shoes 9 years ago do the same thing and succeed, and you have be a little part of or a piece of their journey. To me, I've seen it on a very small scale. The people that I've interviewed have seen it on a bigger scale. And I was shocked in how willing people were to lend a hand up. And that's why if you ever see any negative comments on Instagram, if you're trying to start your own thing, people don't punch down. And I always say that. It's always coming from somebody who's jealous of the position that you're in. And in this world of content creation and podcasting, it's something that people have to get used to. I don't know if a lot of your listeners are looking to start podcasts, but I would say if you are, 90% of podcasts don't make it to episode 5. So if you do that, you're in the top 10%.
Yeah, no, and I made the commitment when I started this that no matter what, I was going to do it for at least a year. I passed the year 1 week ago, and I'm still going with this episode, right? I'm not just going to stop and be like, cool, I won. I made it a year. But it's actually become an important part of my journey. Anyone listening to this likely knows I'm also a coach. I'm also an investor. I also work full time and I have a family. So it's, hey, why would you spend so much time doing this on top of that? But it's because there's tremendous value, not only for myself, but I know that I can pay that forward to others. And yeah, as far as people who might be considering starting a show, I think some people don't realize that it's not actually that the barrier to entry is pretty low, technologically speaking, but the commitment and the consistency, that's the real barrier to entry, right? Anyone can probably jump on a call, record it, and release it on YouTube and push it out to Apple and Spotify. But are you willing to do that on a recurring basis? Well, arguably, that's what you probably got to do to get growth and get continuous value. But I also have seen a slew of creators that are everyday mom and pop investors who have their own YouTube channels, and they'll record some of the conversations they have with their friends or the other investors in their community. And there's a lot of value embedded in kind of those smaller accounts and less formal formats too. And I think that building a library of content, whether written or video or recorded, whatever it is, can only serve you well in the long run if you're willing to put in that work. But I definitely acknowledge it's not for everyone. But so with that said, so we talked about how the podcast started and how it's empowered your network. But along with that came a ton of mindset shifts, right? And it sounds like because you saw the accessibility of some of these people who are willing to lend a hand forward and inspire, you and Ryan both also learned to think bigger for your own goals. Can you talk about like what some of your real estate goals were when you started versus maybe like a year into your podcast? Like what kind of changes you felt in yourself?
Yeah, totally. The goal in the beginning was one property a year for 10 years. And I think a lot of people have that goal because, by the way, if you do that, you will be in an amazing position. There's no doubt about it. If you buy 3 properties, you're going to retire a millionaire. Now, a millionaire in 25 years, some may argue it's definitely not what a millionaire is today and certainly not 30 years ago. But the goal was one property a year for 10 years. Now, as Ryan and I started to build our portfolio, 2 units turned to 4, 4 turned to 8. And when we got to that like 8 mark between the two of us, we had a property burned down. I sold a property. So we were around that 6 number. We've seen a lot go on in our personal portfolios, but we thought we could do this and continue on doing it, the two of us, or we could find like-minded individuals and immerse ourselves in a community of people who are doing it. And maybe there's opportunity for us to get a piece of a bigger pie. Some people may argue, I want to own the whole thing, and that's totally fine too. But what it has done is it has taught us to think bigger. So now owning around 70 units, we own a portion of a 7-unit project, a portion of a 43-unit project, and then an 18 unit that we are general partners on. And we realized throughout the process, we can bring a skill set to the table and not do the entirety of the deal. Like Ryan and I are good marketers. We are good relationship builders. We do like client retention, if you will. So that's like investor relations. We bring money to the table and we find great operators. Now, we don't work with a lot of them, but we find really great operators who are really good at finding deals and analyzing deals and are really good at running the renovation projects and property management. And those two skill sets mesh, and it brought us the ability to grow our portfolio more exponentially. So now we have a goal to get to that $15,000 a month in passive income through real estate. There's no sense. I'm not going to retire. I love to coach and I love to teach, but that number feels really comfortable. And also the appreciation loan pay down and the tax benefits that you get from it, that's all going to pay on top of that. So that's how it's shifted, is that we've gotten in bigger rooms with people who have just set our mindset forward, thinking you don't have to just think about this as 1 unit a year. You can think a lot bigger.
Yeah. And I suppose my question was a bit fundamentally flawed, right? Because bigger doesn't always equate to better. But like you said, examining what your skills and your sweet spot is, and maybe some of the strengths that other people have on some of these larger multifamily deals, where maybe you could come in as a passive investor or raise capital, take your guys' marketing skills in your network and bring the needed capital to a deal where there's a really competent operator, but maybe they're not plugged in the same way to a network of people who have money. And so just that's what I mean is like recognizing the different types of opportunities and how they might serve your long-term goals. I think you already hit at this, but it's like the unit count is the first measure that most people focus on of, okay, if I buy one property per year and it makes $250 net cash flow and I do that 10 times, 10 years in a row, then that will get me to freedom. But not all properties are created equal, right? $250 a month cash flow on a $80,000 property in a flat market is different than $250 a month in a appreciating market on a house that you were able to buy at a steep discount using some slightly more advanced strategies, right? So that's what I mean by bigger is how to continue to amass tools and recognize opportunities that might be a little more outside of the box than what you thought when you started, which just sounds like that's what happened.
Yeah. I can give you an example of exactly that. And there's all these metrics and people throw around, but the one that I want to talk about is like return on equity. So I bought my first rental property for $125,000 in New Jersey. And I remember thinking, I kid you not, 2 weeks into owning this property, it was raining inside my house, like raining through the windows. And I'm like, what am I doing? Is this the biggest mistake of my life? And I'm thinking to myself, I'm calling somebody that I met one time. I'm calling a person that I've had 3 conversations with about who I knew was a real estate investor. And they're thinking like, why is this person calling me? Because I didn't have the community. I didn't have the mentor to show me what to do. That's why we started our program. But the point of this story is that I remember I bought this property for $125,000. It cash flowed probably $300 a month for the first year. The second year, it lost $300 a month. And the third year, it made maybe $100 a month. So we're talking about $100 a month in 1 year, breaking even in 2 other years. And then I turn around and I look at the property because I did some work to it. I put a bathroom in, I replaced flooring. Anytime something needed to be done, I did it. And I was doing it alone with some contractors. But I thought to myself, if these tenants need something done, I want to make sure that I'm doing right by them. But I had this anxiety about this property because I thought it wasn't working. I turn around, I look at it, this property is worth $220,000 in 3 years. And I think, wait a second, my return on equity is essentially zero. I'm not getting any cash flow from this property. Why don't I sell this property and go buy a property in another market, in an appreciating market? And I did exactly that. I took that $100,000 roughly of equity that I had and I bought a property in Tampa, Florida that I use as a short-term rental that brings me about $1,500 a month in cash flow. So turning that $30,000 initial investment, that third 25% down on 125, into $100,000 of equity, taking that equity and putting it into an appreciating market, doing renovations, doing furnishing, that property appreciating more than the money that I put into it, turning that $30,000 initial investment into in 4 years. That is when I saw the power of real estate. And I was like, okay, now I need to figure out how I can play Monopoly in real life.
100%. Yeah. I call it like portfolio chess, but I think that Monopoly is probably a more accurate representation. But I think, so there's one thing so yes, the return is the headline of that story, but also the buying that property in New Jersey in the first place is what enabled the entire thing, right? So when you first bought that property, you mentioned you didn't have mentors and community and all that to lean on. What was it that made that property stick out to you that, hey, this should be my first?
I bought a house hack that I lived in. I bought a 3-bed, 2-bath. I rented it out to my 2 roommates and I was living for essentially $200 a month. And the reason I got that information is because I was working for the Philadelphia 76ers actually. And I was making next to nothing. I loved the job, but my boss, who actually had real estate on the side, he told me, you should buy a house and you should rent out the rooms to all the people that live here. Buy a 6-bedroom house and rent out the rooms. And I thought, why would I do that? And what I realized is he was trying to get me to stay and make money on the side so that I could support myself enough to stay with the organization. I ended up leaving at some point after that, but I had one person who told me, okay, this is a good move. Once I was saving, instead of spending $1,500 a month in rent, roughly, and having that be $200 a month coming out of my pocket, I had more money. And then I thought, okay, maybe I can do this and not live in the property, buy a duplex. And so I just simply talked about 2 people around me that I wanted to get into real estate. And I ended up buying this property. And this is why we talk about the power of the first rental property. is because it doesn't matter if it cash flows $100 or if it cash flows $1,000. The training and the mindset shift that you get with knowing that long term real estate is going to appreciate, as long as you don't lose your shirt on that first deal, it should change your entire mentality and your entire life on what is possible. And I look at people like even my parents who have just two properties. The equity that they have built in those properties have allowed them to be in such a different financial position 30 years later than they would have been if they had never bought just a single property. So to answer your question a little bit, that was a roundabout way. It was just get a cash flowing asset. It wasn't this property is the one. I put a bunch of offers in. I have stories about not knowing that you couldn't market the property before closing. So somebody thought I was like trying to steal their property. It just, I was so anxious or hungry to get the process moving when I was about 26 or 27 that I would just do anything to try to get my first rental. And then that changed the game.
Absolutely. I think sometimes it sounds a little more intense than it is, but I really think of it as an identity shift, right? When I bought my first rental property, my wife and I bought one. It was about as safe as it could be. It was a mile from our primary residence was. We put 30% down so that we could have a nice buffer of cash flow. It was a newly rebuilt property. So we were taking very little risk we didn't have a big renovation plan or anything like that. And it was in a neighborhood that we knew like the back of our hand because we lived there. Arguably, when I go back and I rerun the numbers, even at the time of purchase, we wouldn't have done that deal knowing what I know now. But I'm glad that I did because I learned several tough lessons. I made some avoidable mistakes, but they didn't cost me that much because we went in with that kind of lower risk. And the agent that sold us that house called us 4 months later and brought us two properties that were being leased to assisted living facilities, which of those two properties have made up over 50% of our total portfolio return to date. And that was just because of one relationship that opened from the first rental we bought. Some of that you can attribute to luck, but at the same time, we embraced the fact that we had that first rental and we changed our identity. It's not that we wanted to be real estate investors. We were real estate investors. And we started embracing everything that came with that, the responsibility, the excitement, the challenges. I've always been entrepreneurially inclined, but I've also always been a W-2 worker. And so I have part of my personality that will never be satisfied unless I am building something for myself as well. Now, we'll put a pin in the topic of W-2s for a second, but because I want to come back to that. But that identity shift of becoming a real estate investor and then just accepting that, I think that's different than someone who just buys a rental property because they think they're supposed to. They hire the first property manager they talk to and they try and set it on a shelf and forget it. You can still make money that way. But arguably, when we're talking about thinking bigger and thinking, how can I really make the most out of this journey as an investor? It does come with that identity shift. I'm curious to just get your thoughts if you agree with that.
Well, it comes with creating the competitive advantage that you now have a knowledge base that you can interact in any setting. So yeah, you could do what you just said, Aaron. If you're a high income earner, for example, you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you're an engineer, or whatever, you make a lot of money. There's ways to look at real estate as your investment vehicle versus your business. And that's like separating factor. Is real estate something that you put money into? For example, you make a good living and you have $100,000 and you want to put it into a multifamily syndication and you want to get a 14% return. That is very possible and you can do that. And that would be using real estate as your investment vehicle. But if you want to build wealth through real estate as a business, I wouldn't recommend buying a property, not doing a lot of research and thinking that your property manager is going to take care of the property like you would, because they won't. But you have to create the systems and you have to train either your property manager or your tenants on how you would want your business run. And there's a number of ways to do that. But I think the identity shift is powerful. Yeah. I really do.
No, totally agree. It can be done that way, but arguably thinking of it more as a business, especially like when you plan to hold something for 10, 20, 30 years, property managers come and go. They retire, they quit, they do something that you don't like and you end up having to move on. If you wait to react to those situations, to come up with a plan or a backup plan or build the skills, it will cost you money. It will reduce your return and cause a lot of stress in your life versus potentially just thinking of it a different way and building the skill set early on so that you can activate it as needed. And also just it serves as a check and balance against, yes, like a property manager is arguably, they're supposed to be a professional that has a skill set that operates a service, in their market. But if you learn about that market and if you learn about how property management works, what the type of rules should be, how to work with tenants and build relationships, how to hold your line and create good, tight systems, but also be flexible when needed. Like those are the type of things that will enhance your business. But also, I think sometimes there's a conception that the only way for an investor to make money is to be ruthless with how they treat their tenants. But there exists a world where you can provide a very quality product and service in a rental property that's a great place to live while still holding your ground and creating structure and rules.
I totally agree. I remember a property we bought in 2021 in New Jersey. We rehabbed it and we were renting it out. And it was in this rental craze phase in the market where the rental prices were going insane. They were going up higher and higher. And I remember somebody that came to look at our property, and they were so grateful and so thankful that they had the opportunity to see the property and walk through it. And this place is great. We love it. I want to raise up my family here. And Ryan and I had this mindset of, we're not going to be slumlords. Like, we're going to take care of these people. When they call and they need something fixed, we fix it. And I think that mentality alone can take you so much further when there's this mutual respect between tenant and landlord. And I think that social media and politics and all that stuff tries to drive a wedge between those people. Everyone is at a different stage in their life. And we have had a renter who had a goal to buy a property. And we told them, you should go buy your next property. So we lost a tenant, but we said, this is what you should do. And they asked us many questions about it. And it's, if you're willing to help people that are trying to do the same thing that you're doing, how can anything but good come from that? And that's how I approach things. Like, we can all win and we can all do it in a respectful way. And I don't believe in any of that slumlording or any of that.
Today's episode is brought to you by the Remote Real Estate Academy, the community I launched last year where I personally coach investors and empower them to buy rental properties anywhere in the United States. My business partner Nathan and I have a collective 15 years experience with over 20 cash flowing out-of-state rental properties. We provide a step-by-step playbook on how you can build your own portfolio and start accessing the life-changing benefits of real estate investing starting today. Go to remoterealestateacademy.com for more info, or better yet, shoot me an email at aaron@aaronamin.com with subject line RREA, and I'll throw in a special bonus for podcast listeners who join the Academy. Now let's get to the show.
Yes, it needs to be said, even though hopefully anyone listening to this would not operate with that slumlord mentality, but it's not a zero-sum game, right? Both sides can win if you treat people with respect and run a type of business that you want to be proud of.
Yep,
okay, pivoting, there's a few more topics I want to hit on. I know we only have limited time here, but the W-2. So part of the thesis of this show, the Hybrid Real Estate Professional Podcast, is that we all have skills and potentially income, and whether it's a current W-2, a past W-2, or even a previous chapter of your life where you played a sport or a part of a program that built something inside of you that you can then use to become successful in real estate. That was a mouthful when I explained it that way. But the idea is that we all have a lot of knowledge and skills that we sometimes kind of compartmentalize and trap inside of ourselves when in fact it can be useful to us today. So I know you held a W-2 that very recently just left, but can you talk about your decision to, even though you had all this other stuff going on, you had the podcast, which was becoming pretty quick and successful and valuable, and you also were amassing all this real estate on the side. Can you talk about your decision to stay engaged and keep a W-2 job throughout, and like what you felt the role of that job was in your bigger picture goals?
Yeah, this is like a giant seesaw that I was on. I think that the reason that I stayed in my W-2 job for as long as I did was because I was working in my family's business, and I have the utmost respect for my family, and I wanted to do everything in my power to help them, i.e. my uncle and my dad, retire. I think so. I found that I was shutting my brain off for one operation and turning it on for another, and working the amount of hours that I needed to be proficient at my W-2 job, but not excellent. And I felt bad about that. And I did not want to, not that I was exploiting or anything like that. I was very good at my job, but I thought there comes a time where you just have to make a decision. And I wasn't quite ready to make the decision, but I did it anyway. And I thought that there's a lot of emotion and it's a whirlwind of events that happened in terms of leaving my family's business. But I felt that we're all going to die one day. And if I don't take this leap now, Nobody's going to show up at my doorstep and say, "Hey, Cory, here's the flag that I'm waving. It's the right time for you to do this." So recently, and I don't know when this podcast is being aired, but as of when we're recording, it was a week and a half ago that I left. And I think that in order to do something very creative and do it really well and put all your time and energy into it, I do think that there comes a shift. And at least for me, that I wanted to run this business, build the portfolio, build the coaching program, run the podcast, and do it with all the energy that I have in every day. And I wake up excited to do it. So I'm not even sure if I answered the question that you're asking, but I I do think that people should hold on to W-2 jobs as long as you can, because I do think that it helps with getting loans. If you like, you don't have to love, but if you like your job and it brings you stability in your life, the question that you should be asking yourself is, what do I need most? Do I need security and stability, or do I need the free world of being an entrepreneur and the making your own schedule and the battle that you go into every day? And for me, I was teetering for a while and needing that like energy boost of I want to control this on my own. I want to do this. Like I am ready. And you know what the worst thing that can happen to me is that I go find another job. And that sounds like not a bad gig. And I have no intention of doing that. But I thought to myself, why not? Why would I not bet on myself? Like we spend all this time and energy and working. You're going to work in this world. Why would you not put the chips in at some point and just said, if I'm talking to my kids and my grandkids one day, it's I at least went for it. Like I have no fear. So not no fear. I have a lot of fear, but I pushed through the fear. So again, I'm not sure if I totally answered your question, but that was the thought process.
No,
that
you
went through
did.
my
You did
head.
answer it. A couple of things come to mind, right? So like ready, the idea of nobody's going to show up at your door with a flag and wave it and say, "Cory, you're ready. Come on out." Ready is relative, right? You have to mentally accept the challenge that comes with making a decision to leave your job. And then the second thing that comes to mind is a mutual friend of ours, Brian Lubin. He has that phrase where your worst case scenario is your present day reality. There's some truth to that. And obviously, if you have a family or a circumstance and you quit your job and you end up in a big financial hole, then maybe it's not your present day reality. There could be worse consequences. But I like the idea behind that quote, which is that, hey, you're going to take a leap of faith, but you still built the skills that gave you the job that you just left. You still have the connections. In your case, your family still certainly supports you and wants the best for you. And even if you didn't end up returning to your family business, there are other jobs you could get if you needed to. So I think that is sometimes a helpful framing of, that if you play out the worst case scenario, it is not typically as bad as people make it out to be in their head. If you really sit down and think about it, you could go back and get a job and regain the skills you need.
I
Go
think
ahead.
about this. Yeah, I think about this, Aaron, like your situation. Were you ready to have twins? Like what, like how could you possibly be ready for that? But you can you can read a book and you can like be like, I'm ready. And then they arrive and you're like, it doesn't matter if I'm ready in a way. So I think that's the same thing with people making big life decisions. And no one's going to show up and tell you that you are. So you make the decision that you were ready and you roll with the punches and you figure it out from there. And it takes maybe an entrepreneurial spirit to think that way, but I think more people should give themselves credit for having the ability to go do that when they don't think it's possible. And it's all a shift in maybe who you're talking to and who you're getting advice from. And if you're getting advice from somebody that is not who you want to be like, then maybe you should rethink even asking the question to those people in the first place.
Amen. So one other part of your background I want to click on is you mentioned the connection to sports. And sorry, remind me, was it you or Ryan or both of you that worked with the 76ers?
Ryan still does. I did at one point. It was like my second job out of school. So I was like 23 to 26. Ryan still works there. But yeah, we did that. We crossed over and worked there at the same time.
So being connected to a professional sports team at the highest level, no matter where you work in the building or within the organizational hierarchy, there has to be something about just being in that environment where people are competing at a world champion level that gets embedded in your personality a bit. Can you talk about some of the influence maybe that being part of that organization had on you and how it maybe translated to a lot of the competitive and the motivation that you have to do your own thing now?
I think sports is the best and biggest metaphor for life in general. I can't wait to have children and get them into sports. And maybe that would be forcing their hand. Hopefully they want to do it. But I think the lessons I that I learned from watching champions compete and watching business people compete and the game of life to gamify it, I think makes it more enjoyable. I think it makes it more palpable. I think it makes it less stressful because you know that you can turn it into a game. And growing up, I played basketball my whole life. And then when my stature ended at just under 5'9", I realized I'm not so sure this is going to become a Division 1 or professional venture for me. So I thought, how can I make the biggest impact possible on, and how can I learn how to teach this game? And I think what I learned with the 76ers is that I love the coaching aspect. So I started coaching at a Division 3 level, then the junior college first, then I went to a Division 3 level, and I was about to try to ascend and try to go full time in that world. And I thought, you know what, I just love the game so much. So I actually went and coached at a prominent private high school where every year we have 8, 9 Division 1 kids, and I get to do that on the side. And I learned from a mentor who is as high level as they come and who's the head coach. And it really made me realize how much I love being around youth, how much I love being around community, and how much building a team in that sphere has helped me become a better coach and building a team in the business world. Um, it's to me, it's all about the people that you surround yourself with and watching kids go from 15-year-old boys to 18-year-old men and having you be a sliver of their success. We have a couple guys in the NBA that I'm proud to have 0.001% of an impact on them. And it's just great to get to see those kids. I was at a fundraising event the other night for a former player who's starting a charity, and just to watch it all go full circle. I do think it started with working with a professional team and watching people elevate their game on so many levels. So it's the competitiveness is not something that I'm not sure if you can teach it, but I think you can improve on it.
And I think people discount how much of the competitive drive in athletes is a mental thing. And it's not, yes, you have to have physical talent to succeed at the highest levels of any sport. But arguably, there are people who are maybe not the most physically talented, but their mental capacity and their mindset can compensate for some of that. Like you said, maybe at 5'9" or I'm 5'6", we probably don't have much of a future in the NBA. But I do think that the mindset component and, like you said, the journey of an athlete going year after year, trying to make those incremental improvements, like it's such a cool representation of it to watch somebody improve themselves. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, well, to me,
No,
and sorry to cut you off there. I think to me, I watch, for example, the improvement that I made from a freshman to a senior in high school. Think about a 14 to 18-year-old kid. Even if they're not going to go professional, which 0% basically do, watch any sport, pick any sport. It can be softball. If you watch your daughter or you watch somebody play softball and you watch them see what works, improve their skill set, put in the time and energy, build up to coming off the bench to starting to batting third, from batting third to getting third team all conference, you think, wow, if I applied this to the afterlife, and I say that in quotes, which is after school or to the real world, could I take that framework and apply it to my real life? You get a head start, in my opinion, on what the actual real world is like. I'm not against school. I think school is great, but it taught me essentially nothing about the business world. What it did do is I was playing sports, and sports taught me, like, these people around me that I'm looking at, that are on my team, they're important. They're important to me. And it's important that I show these people that I care. And if I do that, maybe the good will come back to me. And I just think I could talk about sports all day. It's just that it's the biggest metaphor and the best metaphor for business life, and just how fun is it too?
Yeah, I love it. The equivalent for me is I'm a musician, I'm a drummer, and this is not a knock against anyone else who plays drums, but some people say they're a drummer and it's like they played when they're 15 in one garage band with a few of their friends and then they never played again. I played drums for going on 25 years now, the last 10 of which I haven't been playing out in public. But that first chunk of time, at my peak, I was practicing 7 hours a day. And it was something I took extremely seriously. And I got addicted to the self-improvement of how much better can I get at this. Me taking it that seriously gave me opportunities to have leadership roles in the symphony I was in and the marching band I was in. I joined bands and I was able to have command, not from an ego standpoint, but as the drummer, you're the backbeat. You're the one that's supposed to be holding things together. and just the development of that skill and that mentality. I use that every single day in my job, in my real estate, in my coaching, everything. And I learned to also build relationships with mentors. And that was the first place that I truly understood the value of a mentor. So I used to go study with some of my favorite drummers. I worked at a drum shop. And when prominent bands would come through town, we would book the drummer to come do a clinic. And then because I worked at the shop, I would ask them, hey, are you willing to do a private lesson? And I'd pay them whatever, a couple $100, which for me, when I was 19, a couple $100 was a lot. But I wanted that hour with them. And we would drum. I would come prepared with specific questions. I'd have one specific thing I'm trying to improve or learn from them. And I'd have a conversation with them. And in doing so, I also was able to become, friendly and keep in touch with some of them. So that muscle I built in my teens and my early 20s and the improvement that I was able to find in myself in that specific skill, I don't view that as some sunk cost that is no longer relevant in my life. I view that as a skill that I can now apply in new contexts that can only possibly serve me into the future. And so I think it's the same parallels you're talking about with sports.
Aaron, it's a beautiful thing. And if you think about it, maybe people have heard this concept before, but in every facet of your life, in preschool, kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth, fifth grade, you have teachers, and then you have coaches in sports, or you have coaches in band, and or whatever you're doing. You have people that are teaching you along the way that you put value into what they're telling you. And then in college, you have professors. And then when you get into the biggest game of all, the biggest game that you can possibly play, and that's life after, people think that they should do it alone, that they shouldn't have coaches. They shouldn't have people that are teaching them to get to the level that they want to go to. And I see all the time people put down courses and coaches, and I'm not sure where this mentality that like I should do it alone comes from, but I can tell you it'll do you a disservice. So I think that where the stakes are the highest, why not seek out somebody who is in a position that you want to be in? And there are so many people willing to give. So that drumming analogy is great. You were able to put processes in your brain that allowed you to become better at all the things you're doing
Yeah,
now.
absolutely. So circling back, I know we're coming up towards the end of our time here. One of the things you said about when you first started your podcast was that you guys wanted to be able to do it at a time where you were still on the same journey as the people you were trying to connect with. And I think that same parallel inspired you guys to launch a coaching program too. As I'm also a coach, right? And I think we have a similar space we operate in. But can you talk about some of the thought process that finally led you to launch that program, and then what some of your goals are with it?
Yeah, I think people would reach out to us a lot, and people are looking for that next level of mentoring and coaching. And what we realize is what's the thing that we can teach people the most that can have the most impact on their lives that we can scale. And we thought that buying your first or next, if you have one or two, we can certainly help you with that too. Your first or next rental property. And what that did for us allowed us to get into rooms where we were the dumbest people in the room. And I thought that is the best experience to be in. Because if you're hungry and you're the dumbest person in the room, then you'll eventually get into rooms where you're not. But I think the goal of it for us is to teach as many people the power of real estate as possible. There are a lot of people that have money or they have time, but they don't have the skill set or the knowledge. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to build a team. They don't have the right mindset. They don't know how to analyze deals. They don't know how to analyze markets. They don't know how to put the pieces together to get their first property. And once they do that, they should have self-sustainability to be able to do it on their own. But our community, what we've done is we put together a community of like-minded individuals that are going to hold people accountable to the things that they say they're going to do. And I think that alone, that person looking over your shoulder saying, hey, I ran the numbers on this deal. I agree that this is a good deal. And three other people agree that this is a good deal. So the analysis paralysis can get thrown out the window. So our goal is to have a community of people that grow together, and this will probably create new iterations, but Ryan and I are very confident we can teach people how to buy their first or next rental property. And then you're also going to be in rooms with people who have done. Our friend Sean, who we're business partners with, has 400 units. He's in our community too. Our friend David, who has 66 units, he's in our community too because he wants to give back. So somebody who's just starting out to have complete close proximity to somebody who's at that level, who's willing to help, to me, our price tag is significantly low for what I think I'm hoping the value to provide to people. So hopefully I
Yeah,
explained that
absolutely.
well.
I think at the end of the day, it's leading by example. You guys are still out there doing deals. You're building skills. You have the core skill you're trying to teach, which is buy your first or next rental property. You've already in this episode mentioned a couple lessons you learned from the first couple properties you had. And you mentioned that you didn't have a coach and a mentor at that time. And maybe some of the things now you're able to give some of that knowledge to someone who would be going through that and maybe help them avoid a few mistakes. But then also, more importantly, like you guys have amassed this incredible network. And like you said, you maybe strategically embedded a couple people in there who are givers who want to give back. They're not doing it because you went and begged them to do it. In this world, there are investors who will gladly give forward with no expectation in return because they know that somebody maybe did that for them and it made an enormous difference. And so I think the idea, I don't know if you ever get this feeling, maybe it's a limiting belief I have, but sometimes when I say I'm a coach, I get that look of like people just assume at the surface level that it's a scam. I don't think it's a scam. I think it's a potential shortcut. I know you very well, and I don't know the price of what you're offering, but I would be willing to bet my bottom dollar that is incredibly fairly priced compared to the potential long-term benefit and value that someone can get from just being in that type of environment. And so I think the notion that someone who opened the coaching program is trying to just like get one on you is fundamentally flawed. And learning from people who have recently been in the position that you're in and have conquered those challenges and paved their own path, I personally don't think you can. I don't think you can necessarily overpay for something like that as long as you take it seriously and actually do the work.
I couldn't agree more. I also think it comes down to the perspective that you have based on your own personal life experiences. Now, if coaches have been just such a they had such a profound impact on my life. And Ryan and I have paid an ungodly amount of money. It's such a weird way to put it. We've paid a lot of money to, it's all relative, right? But we've paid a lot of money to coaches. We found out what we like. We found out what we don't like. We found out what works for us, what works for the time being. And by the way, if somebody comes into our program and builds 30 units, we're going to tell them, stay in our community, right? For the $79 a month that it costs to stay in our group, but go find another coach who can help you scale further than us. It's about really, at the end of the day, if your mindset and your mind frame is as a coach on helping that individual person be the best version of themselves that they can be, then the money and all of those things will come to you because people are going to want to seek out other people that are trying to do good things. And I know I've said that a couple times in the show, but I really firmly believe that. We've told several people that it's probably not a good fit for them. And I think that we are judging that based on the fact that if I were in their shoes, I wouldn't pay this to come in this program. So it's all about fit, and it's all about putting yourselves in a position to be around people that are doing the things that you want to do. So that's our
I love
goal.
it. Yeah, we live in a crazy world where even when you guys started your podcast 4 years ago, there were fewer podcasts, there were fewer communities. There wasn't everybody and their dog having a school community. And now there's just, it's such a crowded space. So then it becomes really, if you're trying to make a decision of whether to join somebody's program or community, you look at the individual, right? Like many ways, we're all teaching a lot of the same content. So then it's who is living a life or kind of walking a path that I want to be walking, at least in most components. And do I believe that by being in their world, I can absorb from that and learn from them and have a better chance at doing that. That's the framing I use anytime I'm considering joining a community or working with a coach, which I still do all the time. Yes, I coach other people, but like I truly believe that I need to continue to be learning, continue to be meeting new people, continuing to draw inspiration from people. That's the only way I can be effective at paying it forward is if I continue to seek out that knowledge and education and remain eternally curious. And like I said earlier, I think your curiosity is one of your superpowers for both you and Ryan in your show, and it just bleeds through in everything you do.
I appreciate that. And I want to give you some credit here too, because when you sent me the framework for building out your coaching program, I am not a process driven individual. So looking at the 67-page document that you gave me, and I was like, holy shit, like this is what it needs to be, right? This is what I need, the framework that I need to put in place. I appreciate you. You probably didn't even know you did this, but just checking me in a way like I'm very like jump out the plane, build a parachute on the way down. And I think that Ryan has kept me in check in terms of, okay, this is the implementation that we need to make this work. And that's why I love having a partner, because the checks and balances and working together has made us bring different skill sets to the table and just been able to provide value to people in new ways. And we learn something new from each other every day. So I'm sure we could talk partnerships for another hour.
Why don't we spend just 2 minutes on partnerships and then we'll wrap it up. So yeah, you've had now a long-term partnership with a good friend of yours. There's risks associated with that, and there's countless benefits associated with that. Just give us the cliff notes of why you decided to go You have several different parts of your business and you seem to be aligned on all of them. Yeah, just give us the cliff notes there.
So every single person that I've told about getting into partnerships have said it's a bad idea. You shouldn't do that. Now I was thinking about who's telling me that. People that actually maybe did have partnerships or had failed partnerships, but I'm always asking myself, who am I asking this information from? And at the end of the day, this all comes down to trust. And I've known Ryan for 13 years, and I know that he has all my bank account information. He's like a brother to me. And it comes down to, are you willing to put the person that you're working with above you? For example, if I know that he's going to be let down, that I'm not doing the work that needs to be done, I work for him. And at the school that I coach at, there's a saying, I am for you. And I don't mean to be woo woo about this whole thing, but I think the point is if you put your partner before yourself and you make sure that you're living up to the needs that you think that they would approve of, I think then your partnership can work. And you're going to go through ebbs and flows in different situations of your life, in different levels and different, I guess, circumstances. I'm not sure the word I'm looking for, but just like Ryan has a child. He's married with a child. I'm not at that stage yet. So there is leeway given for different circumstances. Ryan still has his full-time job. So I could not recommend partnerships enough, but the person that you go into a partnership with will make or break your potential business. And I think it has to be someone that you trust like a family member, and it has to be someone that you're willing to have open and honest conversations with that are uncomfortable, that you know that you can get through because of the trust and love essentially that you have built with that person.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah. The way I always think about it is usually partnerships are formed out of a moment of excitement and aligned interest, usually a lot of passion behind that initial formation and whatever that first idea you're going to go after is. You have to project 10 years into the future and think, yes, our lives may be aligned right now, but like you said, you have a kid, maybe somebody moves, right? There will be competing forces as you build your own lives with your own families and follow whatever paths come in front of you. And if your goal is to have a 10, 20, 30-year relationship, it's the same principles minus the romance that you use in a marriage, right? You got to be willing to weather the storms and grow and change together and accept those changes and be able to navigate them, or know when there's time to correct course or change course or even split. So no, we got to have another episode on partnerships, because I think that's something that's on a lot of people's mind. I've heard a lot of people reach out to me about that, but that was a great summary and a good teaser for now. Thank you so much for being generous with your time. I had a blast, and I mean it when I say that you running your podcast and being as consistent as you've been, and then encouraging me directly in the group we were a part of, has played a huge part in me pushing through some of the dips and motivation I've had with getting 1 year and beyond in this podcast. So I do personally thank you for that. It's the same way that you said that document I sent you had a big impact on you. It's like the small things you say that have a big impact on someone else. You've definitely played that role for me as well, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Aaron. I appreciate you having me on. I'm glad that it's funny. We've never even met in person. I've had number of conversations with you, but I feel a connection. I appreciate your friendship. I think that watching you grow is even over the past year has just been really cool to see with your program. And I wish you the best with everything that you do. So thanks for having me on. This has been a lot of fun. I love talking shop, real estate, investing, entrepreneurship, people. So
of course.
Again,
and where can people find you?
Yeah. So the best way to find me and Ryan is at Wealth Juice Official on Instagram. We also have a YouTube channel, and then the Wealth Juice podcast, anywhere you can listen to podcasts. But the best place to find us is probably on Instagram. And if you have any interest in getting into real estate or scaling your portfolio, please shoot us a DM. Happy to chat, or just look at our free content. We've been doing it for 5 years. And I think that for us, it's fun. So hopefully you get some value in that, but shoot us a message. The best way to find us is definitely on Instagram.
We'll drop all that in the show notes, and hopefully I'll be having you back on again sometime soon. All right. Thanks, Cory.
Thank you for making it to the end of today's episode. As you may know, podcasts are very difficult to grow organically. If you're getting value from today's episode, I'd deeply appreciate if you can take 30 seconds to leave my show a 5-star rating and review. This will go a long way to helping me reach more listeners just like you. Thank you so much in advance.